Welcome back. Level one coach podcast. Drew and me, Kel, back at you. I'm going to kick it over to my partner right away. He's going to lead us off with a quote today, and then we are going to rock from there.
So the quote comes from a book that we mentioned, I think maybe one or two episodes back now. It's called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And without giving a ton of background information, because it's not necessarily all relevant here, but he's explaining essentially how people come to believe the things they do, and whether those things stem from childhood, before childhood, just when they're born. So I'll give you the quote, which doesn't actually come from Jonathan Haidt. It comes from a neuroscientist named Gary Marcus. And the quote is, "Nature provides a first draft, which experience then revises. Built in does not mean unmalleable. It means organized in advance of experience." So I'll throw that back to you because I know you have some thoughts and we can take it from there.
Yeah. So, what it makes me think of is like I jumped to a story right away, pretty very personal to me. I interviewed for a video coaching job in the East Coast League 2 or 3 summers ago. And what I didn't talk to you off air about was based on the resume that I submitted, you can see that I have a strength and conditioning background. They needed one of those too. And then I also have coaching experience, and the head coach wasn't against like a smaller assistant role also that could like build into something, at least at first on the surface. And me being me, like I was angling or like kind of being like, hey, I can do more than be a video coach. Um, so right off the hop, I was kind of hitting at all that. But anyway, as like whether the staff got to talking, whether it was after my interview, what have you, it started to go away from like, hey, Drew, we're interested in you doing all three of these things to like, can you even be a video coach? And um, you talk about like the quote hits at like a fixed, like it's kind of Carol Dweck in a way. Like that's where I go with it. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And if you're gonna live in a world where because Drew has never been a video coach before, now you're going to start to have like doubts that he can even do it at all. Um, that's one kind of person. And then the other kind of person, which I haven't met in professional hockey yet, is this is simply just a learning curve. And let's see how fast a person that we're interested enough to interview. So, like, maybe we should have a little bit of confidence in the person. Let's see how fast he can get up this learning curve. And what eventually ended up happening was they gave me their Steva software login, whatever, and they told me to live tag 2 games. And the first game I was shit. Like I was missing turnovers because I didn't know where the buttons were. I was missing breakout opportunities to tag. Like I was all over the place. Um, and then the second game I got a lot better, like right away. Between 1 and 2 was like a significant difference. At least I felt subjectively. And then they only told me to do two, but like me being me, I just did a third. And by the third game, I wasn't really missing. I'm sure if they got like really nitty gritty, I was probably missing a few things, but I felt very comfortable with the skill set of live tagging a game after 3 games. So call it 6 hours. Um, and like the going back to the quote and like this idea of like fixed mindset, growth mindset, like your truths and truth is true based on your perception, based on the level of how you see the world. So, in a sense, they're right. Drew can't do this. because Drew's never done this. They're right. And that's why I didn't end up getting the job, apparently, or whatever. Um, and then on the other end, if I'm interviewing with a coach that sees it from a more growth mindset, what I would call, 400, 500 level, that person's going to be like, okay, let's talk about this process. Talk me through it. Okay, you were shit the first game. You were a little bit better the second game. And by the third game, you had it. Our first game isn't for 2 months. I think you can get there. Like, let's just move forward. And you can be our video coach, even though you haven't been a video coach before. So, um, before I spill too much more of my resentment and negative emotions, I'll kick it back to you if you have thoughts.
So this is something that just came to mind as you were talking for me is like I'd almost want to know more. I would want to see you do game one, and then I would want to see you 6 hours later. And I don't even care how good that 6 hours later version is. Maybe it's still not good enough to do a live game for the team. But if in 6 hours you went from call it being at level 0 to level 4, I'd be like, okay, so maybe if we give him 2 more weeks, he could get to 8. And I I don't know exactly how this could apply to other things off the top of my head, but more so, I guess, caring about how much better you can get in a short period of time than how good you actually are at the end of it. So it'd almost be like, and this would be a little difficult to do, I suppose, but if you were, let's take like high school because there's hockey post high school. Like if you're a sophomore making the varsity team, and I'm a junior coach evaluating, like maybe I should be paying attention to just how much better you got from sophomore year to senior year versus how good you actually are as a senior. And then if I saw massive improvement, okay, there's some real potential here that now I can take you on as a first year junior player and really improve you by year 2 or 3. And I and if I had to guess, and I'm not really guessing because I think it happens a lot at the highest levels, like what you do instead is you see that player as a sophomore and they're not a refined product and they're not as good as other sophomores are. And so by the time they're a senior, you've already written them off because you've already in your mind kind of prejudged to the point where you're like, yeah, they did get way better as a senior, or they have gotten much better by now as a senior, but man, they were so blank as a sophomore that I can't, we can't justify taking them. And I don't even, juniors, college, like I think we all do it, myself included. Um, and this just came to mind again. This is all stuff we didn't really touch on off air, but like, I actually think some of the individual sports like tennis or golf get this right, where coaches or like golf pro, so yeah, coach, like they look for potential in younger players, regardless of how good they actually are that day. And now, and I guess the difference here is that their timeline is almost, it's not infinite, but in terms of like hockey or soccer or football, it's pretty damn near infinite because you could take a 12-year-old tennis player and stay with them until they're 50 or 40, whatever. Same thing with golf, 50, even 55 older. So like I think maybe that's why those sports are able to do that so much better. Um, but I think in some ways, like when you go out and find a 12-year-old player that you want to work with in tennis or golf, you're not really looking at what they are that day or even what they'll be in year 3. You're looking at year 7, 10, 12. And again, in a sport like hockey, whether you're coaching at college or juniors or pro, like you don't always have that timeline. Our game is not as streamlined where you can go 4 years of high school and then, right to college, right to pro, or even if you're looking at a sport like football, I mean, it's not like NFL teams have academies like maybe European soccer programs do, where you can bring the kid up in the Baltimore Ravens Academy. So the timelines are different and you're forced to do maybe different things than you could in some of those other sports I'm mentioning. But for me, I think like just realizing that you you want obviously somewhat of a finished product, or somewhat of a refined product in terms of the player you're getting, but there's also a lot of capacity to grow, and I think that's what our neuroscientist friend Gary Marcus is getting at. That sure you can find there are players or there are people out there that have this sort of built-in experience or built-in programming, if you will, prior to anything that you're going to talk to them or work with them on. But that there's also a lot of room to be malleable, to grow and to improve. And it's not always just the that first draft you're getting is not the end draft, I guess.
Yeah, a lot comes to mind there. I'm gonna try and contain myself and not get too squirrely. But the
Yeah, sorry,
first
I went all over there.
no, you're good. The first thing I'll dovetail off the last thing you said. So like if you think of it like hardware versus software. So like every human comes out the womb with their hardware and early, you know, one, two, three, four, maybe not a whole lot's going on, but like as soon as they have the ability to communicate, um, and like start to see the world, that's where the software just starts getting plugged in. So like, what are their parents doing and saying? What are their preschool teachers, kindergarten teachers doing, saying? What are their early coaches doing, saying? And that starts to program them. So sure, you have like what's innate, which is what Gary used as a term, and then you have which is the hardware, and then you just have the ability to completely change someone's mindset, outlook, perception for the better or for the worse, depending on what software is getting plugged into them. Um, so that was the first thing. And then just kind of going off of that, like I think of two players come to mind right away. I've done some study on Josh Hosang, and the other player that I'll mention so I don't forget to look out for this year is Pierre-Luc Dubois. And when you look at Josh Hosang's career and you look at his story, he started in the Islanders organization. Uh, and if you want to look at who the higher ups were when he was there, you can, in terms of GM, in terms of coach, whatever. Um, and you can listen to his story and the fact that on the first day of training camp, he was late and they just buried him, sent him back to junior. You're not mature enough, shame, ridicule, whatever. And then he had to exist when he was no longer junior eligible. He had to exist in their American Hockey League organization. Same GM, same oversight, same people that now are casting him as this person. He's that guy. And they're those people that were dealing with him were very fixed mindset, what I would call force. Um, and then he kind of just bounces around Islanders and their AHL team for a bit and eventually just kind of washes out with them. They're done with him. And who signs him? Ryan Hardy. And Brian, very much power guy, very much growth mindset, very much love based. Greg Moore was the coach of the Marlies too. Both were with the Steel. I could go on, but I won't. And what happens? Josh Hosang has the best year of his career to that point with the Marlies when there is love in the environment, where there is a growth mindset, and where he's not his past and he's not in this box. And that's typically like what you're saying when I think the edge and what the best like scouts and general managers do is they go so far in the weeds as to who has this player played for and what can I learn about the coach that's actually coached this kid for a while. So if you have a kid that played junior hockey in a very like force or fixed mindset environment, he has a ceiling that everyone thinks he has with a force coach or with a fixed mindset coach. I'm using these interchangeably now. Um, and then there's this other ceiling that a lot of people, I think the smart ones know exist. There's another ceiling of what this person can be in a growth mindset environment, in a free environment, in a power environment, whatever word you want to use. So, what Spencer Carberry and Washington, I think, know is Spencer is very much growth mindset. He's very much power. And they're going to take a guy in Pierre-Luc Dubois who everyone thinks is a problem, is a piece of shit, whatever they say about him. And I bet he's going to have a career year this year because he had a ceiling playing for certain people with certain mindsets, but he has a whole different ceiling playing for a guy like Spencer Carberry, playing for a guy like Ryan Warsofsky, Joe Mazzulla, people that we name on this podcast that employ power or what we're referring to in this one as a growth mindset. So like if there's love in the environment, there's a whole nother level. And I think the best people in the world in our game, like a Ryan Hardy, understand that. And there are people that are like undervalued right now or cast off, but it's only because of the gross, toxic, disgusting environment that they were in for a while. And they can pull more out of them. I'll kick that to you.
Yeah, Josh Hosang is an interesting example because I remember hearing about him like as a generational type player when he was really young, like McDavid-esque. And then going from, I'm not going to rehash all the details you just gave, but going from kind of organization to organization and never maybe finding his footing in what felt like underperforming maybe for him from the outside, but also like when you dig a little deeper, like you said, maybe there were some elements of it that like he wasn't really being put in the best position to succeed. And so sure, you could say he underperformed, but also like where was where was the basis for him, or I guess like yeah, was he being put in a position to succeed from the start, really? And it makes me think of I remember being like probably not quite in college yet, and I just remember like seeing you look up a player or you watch the Frozen Four or I mean for me like growing up maybe the odd like major junior game. And it felt like every time like a top player for any team was probably a junior or senior. And I remember like having this conversation. I think it must have been with my dad, um, looking at it, and it felt like, this guy would go to the OHL and his first year he'd do okay, and then his second or third year he'd have really, really good numbers. And you can almost do this with like guys that are top end draft picks. Like I'm thinking guys that are like I said, highly drafted or even undrafted, where it's like they follow this similar trajectory of like, 50, 60 games with London Knights and they have like 20 points their first year. And the next year they have like 70. And the next year, if they even stay, they have 130. And you can kind of do the same thing with college. Like guys come in as maybe freshman, sophomore, and they have like 10, 15 points. And then junior year, it's like 40, senior year, 60 or something. And I used to always attribute that, and still partially do, to like getting adjusted to the level. You come in year one and like you just don't know the level. You never played at that. at that level before. So it takes you a while to get acclimated and then to figure out how to thrive. And ultimately, like, I do think that is true because for sure, if you stay in the same level or stay at the same level for 4 years, year four should be easier than year one, just in terms of um, what you're used to, what to expect, and now you've been through it before. But the other part of it that I never attributed to at a young age that now I would say is absolutely true and probably plays just as big of a role in the physical, or sorry, probably plays just as big of a role as does the physical being used to the league, is the psychological safety that you have as a second or third year player with the London Knights or as a junior or senior on your college team. So now, your first year in the OHL or your freshman year, you might be worried that if you have a bad weekend, let's say, or bad 4 games, so 2 weekends, um, you might be scratched or you'll be taken off of the power play and into a lesser role. But by the time you're a junior or senior, or you're a second or third year OHL player, like if you're in the OHL, you've already seen that previous batch of first rounders leave. So you're up now. You're one of the guys that should be drafted highly or already was. And so you're safe. Like you don't feel like your spot in the lineup is going to be taken if you have a bad weekend. You're the guy. And as a junior senior, it's absolutely true that when you get to that age, you're in your college career, like there could be some really good freshmen on your team, some really good sophomores, absolutely. Not to say that there aren't, but you also know like I'm probably you might literally be a leader on the team with a letter, or you're seen as a leader, even if you're not. And if I have a bad weekend, like I'm probably not being taken out. Even if I have 2 bad weekends, I'm probably not being taken out. And so with that comes the ability to play a more confident game and probably try things or do things that you wouldn't have done as a freshman or sophomore. So that all came to me kind of as you were talking with like the Josh Osang stuff and even Pierre-Luc Dubois, that like you have this ceiling, perceived ceiling as a player, and then you find an environment where maybe you feel as though you're more important or you're more valued or you're quite literally just safer. Um, and now you're able to like achieve a new ceiling. And it's not that if this were to happen to Pierre-Luc Dubois, or when this happens to college players, like I think we oftentimes, and then when I say we, I'm thinking more like media, writing, all that kind of stuff, attributes it to like he went out and crushed his summer and he got way stronger or he got much better. And those things all could be true. And in the players' eyes, they probably are true. Like I really did spend a lot of time over the summer trying to improve X, Y, and Z. But beneath the surface, probably the biggest factor, or if not the biggest, one of the biggest factors, is that you're now in a different environment where if you're Pierre-Luc Dubois, where you're safer and you're valued, or as a college player, junior player, like I was talking that example, you're in the same environment, but you're seen differently now. You're seen as one of the top dogs or one of the leaders. So now you have this like extra, I don't want to say rope, but you just have this extra leeway that maybe you didn't used to have as a younger player. So I think like there's all these elements that go into it physically with did you get better, did you improve, but also did your literal situation within the team just change in terms of who's perceptually above you versus now you're perceptually above a lot of guys. So yeah, that's just something else that like I said came to mind just as you were speaking.
Yeah, it could be as simple as an internal mindset shift. It doesn't even have to be like with Josh Hosang, it was literally going to a different environment, and that environment brought out the best in him. But you're saying even if it's not great and you don't even necessarily like your junior coach, but like what came to my head in the situation that you were talking about, and like this happened with me my first year of juniors. I played tier three all 3 years, and the first year I looked at the lineup card every day that it was posted, and by the last year I didn't look at the lineup card um at all. Like I knew I was going to be on there. I just might as well start getting dressed. So it's like what what level of perception am I at in my first year? Probably fear, like probably that just to give you like a numbers quantified 1 to 1,000, like I'd be at 100, and 100 is the fear level. So like that's how I looked and viewed the world, and that's how I timidly looked at the line chart when it was posted. Am I on it? Am I not on it? Um, and then by the third year, like you get out of fear and you just know there's this inner confidence, or if you've been playing at that level for that long, you should advance to the point that you're in every day. So then you're not at 100 anymore. You're at least at 200, and there's this confidence that you're just going to be on there. And what does that do? That unlocks you because you're out of like we've talked about like lower brain versus higher brain. You're out of that like lower brain fear, and you're into your higher brain, and you're not playing to like not get scratched. You're playing to go impact the game. Um, I'll kick that to you.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good.
You're getting to exactly, I think, as you're speaking, it's funny, like I didn't think of this as I was talking, but same exact experience for me. It was in college, like lineup came out, usually automatic, or automated email from our coach at like 6 a.m. Every day of game. And I remember as a freshman, a sophomore, and even as a junior, like I would look at that thing and I'd be like, I was expecting for sure as a freshman, expecting not to see my name in, and then happily surprised when it was. And then every time it wasn't, I was like, see, I knew it. And I like, even though there were more, and I don't say this to brag, I just, in terms of pure percentage, like there were more instances where I was in than not, but I still hung on to the times I wasn't in, that in the future I was like, it's going to happen again. And even as a sophomore, junior, and then finally, like as a senior, being a captain and stuff, then I looked at it, but now I was looking at the line chart to see like who got left out today. Not like am I in? Like I knew I would be in. Um, and the reason I bring that up is, and you just said it, but I was gonna say the exact same thing. So to drive that point home, when you're in that fear mindset, like you're talking about for you in year one, for me as a freshman, like you're just hoping to get in. And when you're in, man, like that was the goal. I got in today. And
Mm-hmm.
that's all you really cared about. And so if you could go out and impact the game, like that was great, but that was just icing on the cake. Like you already won by being in that day because you're looking around for you probably um at some of your buddies that were new to the team, and for me as like other freshmen that didn't get to play, that you're just like, I'm just happy I'm in tonight. And by the time you get to that like junior, senior year, or year two or three for you, like you're now going out and being like, it's not good enough just to be in. And now I know the team relies on me to do X, Y, and Z. And whether you're a starting goalie, whether you're a top six forward, a top D pair, like now you have expectations once you're in to perform. And so that allows you, there's pressure there, but it also allows you to like shift your mindset to what are you now expecting of yourself? And it's no longer good enough just to go in and be, net even on the night and not really have any impact. Like that now is equivalent to being scratched 2 or 3 years ago. So I think it also like there's the psychological safety aspect of it, but then there's also the self expectation of like, what are you striving for? Like, is Drew just striving to get in tonight? Well, he got in, he won. Now, like, Drew's striving to be, let's say, at least +1 on the night and on the ice for no goals against, regardless of if he finishes +1. And so now you have like tangible goals that you want to reach each night. Could be different than that, obviously, but you're no longer just measuring of like, did I partake in warmups and wear the jersey? Perfect. That's all I want. So it also forces you or enables you to be better because you push yourself to achieve more than just getting in.
Yeah, I do want to. We talked about this off air. I do want to switch or not switch gears, but we talked about like we started with like the coaching aspect of it. We got into the player thing, but we were talking about just to circle back to the beginning and get back on kind of the same thread. But we were talking about a coach. You were talking to me off air, um, and we were talking about this fixed, going back to the quote from the very beginning, this fixed mindset, growth mindset difference. And just as a level one coach, um, you were talking about a coach who was very much level one, and how, just like I experienced with my interview that we spoke about on this one, there's kind of this prejudgment, or we were getting into how it might be ego, um, pride, or just like you're attached to, because it's the level that you've played at, been at, coached at for a while, it becomes more important to you. And it's harder to like let level ones in. If you want to kind of tee up that story, and then we can kind of reattack from there.
Yeah, like the example I was giving you was like you said, a level one coach coming from a lower level trying to coach at a higher level, and no playing experience at that higher level, no coaching experience at that higher level, and coming into the interview process where ultimately he ended up getting this job, but coming into it, um, was told by the coach he's interviewing after the fact, of course, that he really wasn't the guy they were looking for, in terms of maybe experience, background, whatever it might be. And that was the prejudgment prior to having this person interview in person with the staff. Just so whatever that might have been off of elite prospects, resume, friggin' Google search, who knows? But then through the interview process, like now he crushed it and crushed it by, essentially like to my knowledge and understanding of the situation, like driving the point home that I'm aware I'm not probably your number one choice on the list of whoever's applied to this job. But if given this opportunity, you definitely won't look back. And I'm more than confident that I can do an excellent job for you. And fortunately, like I think this staff that hired him understood the position they were in within the landscape of their level or league, that they needed to take chances on people. And they didn't have either the funding or the notoriety to just go out and, hire a former player who had then moved, played at a super high level and would just definitely come back and do it for a great salary. Like we needed to be innovative here and take some chances. And so I give that staff credit and recognizing like this is what we are and we've got to lean into this. But ultimately, where we were taking this, or where we were talking about this off air, is like, so now this guy who ended up getting the job, he's gone on to have honestly an impeccable career to this point, and pretty impressive with what he's done at multiple different stops. But for him in this first opportunity, like not only did he have to go in and earn this job just as anyone does, he had to fight the perception that he couldn't do it on top of going and earning the job. And um, to think that like that happens often is I do understand it, or like it's natural that like humans, just the way we are, we make snap judgments on what we see and what we hear. So we're always going to do that to a certain extent, and there's no way to like truly abolish that entirely. But well, I'll throw it back to you because I had a different angle on it, but I'll throw it back to you as far as like sort of how we can counter that, or try to get away from it.
Yeah. Um, it it hits personal again. I've got scars, if you guys don't know, but this off season, different professional hockey interview-ish in the mix for a position, and a coach that knows me, um, got the head coaching job, full send, whatever. And his first call is always me. Like, do you want to be involved? Um, so in talking, this guy's talked to his president, GM, whatever, who's ever in charge of potentially adding staff, and said, hey, like, this is Drew's background, this is his stuff. You can look into it if you want. Here's his resume. Here's where he's coached, what have you. And his response was, really? Like this guy? Um, and it wasn't like a good really. It was like a, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. There's no way we're gonna hire this guy. Um, and it just goes to where I, after thinking about it, um, I think where it goes to is like an ego, pride, and just a self-importance thing. So like this president has played at this professional level of hockey for a while. So when that happens, there's typically an inflation of, you know, this is my NHL. This is the highest it's ever been. So like I have to perceptually make this and treat this probably above what it is. And if that's the case, and I'm looking at Drew's resume, and he currently coaches a 10U squirt team in Kansas City, um, which isn't on my resume. But he's if I'm looking at that, and he's had a 4-year gap and hasn't coached anywhere, and he coached Tier 3 for a really bad team, and there's no way I can bring that guy in because this level is more than it is in my brain. And again, everyone thinks they're right based on where their level of perception is currently. So if your level of perception is, I've played at this level, it's a great level, not everyone can do this, I have a fixed mindset, then of course I'm not going to be a viable candidate for that job. But all of this comes from like all of this hang up and this contrast and why I can't get in at various levels that I think I could do an adequate job is from attachment. And attachment comes from the things that we believe in. And this person is attached based on his importance and how important this level is to him. So long story longer. Um, that's what's going on there. If you have thoughts.
Yeah, it's like it's not to say that you shouldn't treat where you are seriously and that you shouldn't, you know, the Olympics are going on. So it's not to say that if you're coaching at the prep school or high school or college level, you shouldn't treat it like your Olympics. Like I think you should in the sense of you should treat this like it is the most important thing to you if you want to advance, get better, and learn from. But at the same time, recognize that it's not, and that you at some point, whoever, this person you're talking about, myself, people who have hired me, who have not hired me, all of us, you were at that same level at one time where you didn't have the resume you have today. You didn't have the experience you have today. And it's like the biggest catch 22, right? Like I haven't really heard this myself a lot, but I've just heard other, like I know it's said a lot and people say it like, well, you don't have experience at this level or you don't have experience with this thing. So then like that's why you don't think you'd be the best fit. But without someone taking a chance and giving you the opportunity to gain that experience, how do you get the experience? So, you're fresh out of college and you're trying to get a job as a teacher and someone says, "Well, we don't think that you can teach because you've never taught before." Okay, that makes sense. Well, then where do I start teaching? Like, how do I get that in? And so that's a little bit different, but to your point, like when you're treating every level or every stop you're at as if it is the Olympics, well, ultimately, like the best athletes and the best coaches are in the Olympics currently because they've theoretically mastered their craft and they've earned the opportunity to be there. So if you are not at the Olympic level and you are only going to allow Olympian level people there, it's pretty tough to think that that's realistic. One, to find athletes or coaches that are going to work with or for you, but also that they're going to truly live up to whatever you think your standards are. Um, and so I think like the other thing that it's a little different. But the other thing we talked about was like it's necessary to constantly fight, in my opinion anyway. It's necessary to constantly fight some of these biases that we have in our own mind. So like this guy with you, his preconceived notion is like, well, Drew's been coaching or not coaching whatever levels that are below where we are today. He couldn't do a good job or he won't do a good job. And I think with players, this happens in the same way. Actually, it's funny. In this past summer, a player asked about a certain league, like, what do you as coaches, either Division 3 or Division 1, do to like, or it was more like, what do you think about the stigma that surrounds blank league? And it's a really good question from the kid. And the answer that he got was also, I thought, good from another college coach. So it was like, look, there have been players from that league that have gone on to be all conference players and win championships for a team in their conference. And he was like, it doesn't like, sure, maybe some people don't think it's the best or have a negative perception of it, but really good players come out of that level all the time and go on to do excellent things in college. So it's on us if we want to find those players to not have this negative stigma surrounding the league just because of the name of the league, or whatever we think of it. And we all do that. I don't care how unbiased or how non-prejudiced you claim you are. Like everybody has a little bit of bias, a little bit of preconceived notion based on prior experience or just personal opinion. But I think it's important to like to sit there and look and think like, okay, with your example, like, okay, Drew hasn't coached at this level before, but I should probably have a conversation with him to figure out if he could do a good job here. And on the player side of things, like, this player's playing in blank league. He obviously hasn't played in college before, and maybe this league doesn't have a huge track record of producing college players. But should I look at him still? Should I have a conversation with him? Should I watch him in person? And should I figure out like, could he do it? Because the answer isn't always going to be yes, but the answer is not unequivocally no. And you won't know unless you give that person, that player, an opportunity to showcase themselves, whether it's, a phone call or watching them live if it's a player. So I think like it's tedious. It's time consuming. It takes intention and effort, but not every time you're going to be led down a path that maybe provides a great return, but you will on occasion or often enough to make it worth doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think where I go with that, and like if you're a younger coach listening, we're both we have this podcast, we're public facing, we give our thoughts on things, we both write, um, and have some version of a newsletter, blog, what have you. Um, and I think where the game is changing and where maybe some of these guys aren't aware of it, even though my resume is just littered with links to my written work, and I don't necessarily care about the piece of paper and my previous experience, and I try to like hammer that home. But the concept of proof of work, which is just put what you think out there, do small projects and showcase them, um, write about your thought process on certain things and just make it easy to find. Um, It'd be one thing if I was applying for this job or in talks with this job or various other professional jobs, and I was just a resume. Well, like a lot of people are. But what's different about you and I and a couple different coaches that we know, is now that they're not a piece of paper and a phone call anymore. They're a piece of paper with a bunch of links to a bunch of written work, a bunch of podcasts that they've been on, done, and you can go as deep as you want on you or I right now on the internet. Um, One, are you willing to do that and like kind of break the programming and the habits that we kind of talked about in the middle of this? Um, and then if you're not, again, it's you win either way. Like they're not your people. if they're going to prejudge you um, based on where you've coached before, because it's not about that. It's about what you're capable of doing. Um, and that can be showcased without someone giving you a job and actually being behind a bench. Like you can still get a pretty great idea of, can this person get up learning curves? How does this person think? And is this person capable of solving problems? And then can they communicate well? And if you can do those four things, you don't have to be behind a bench for 20 years and have that on your piece of paper resume. People should just be able to see he can do the communication, he can do the thought process, he can solve problems, he can articulate points, he can coach. Um, so yeah, I'll kick that over to you.
Yeah, I really think it gets back to what we were saying earlier about like how much can you improve in a short time versus where are you at today? And I think the more that you can the more you can discern how much someone has been able to improve over a short period of time, like to me that should matter just as much, if not more, than what they've, I guess, theoretically already accomplished or what like they're currently doing. And I think you've given this example before in the past of a coach who in his hiring process used to invite like call it 4 or 5 candidates out to a tournament or like camp showcase thing, and they would run one of the teams, and then he would just observe how the 4 of them, 5 of them interacted, coached, communicated, taught. And I think it's like, I mean, I'll tell you first and foremost, that process is definitely time consuming. It takes a lot of effort and it probably is expensive unless you're flying or driving the candidates out on their own money, which maybe it is. But I don't know how that works. But the point is like it's not as simple as a Zoom or just a phone call or even like an in-person thing. It's going to take longer. It's going to require a lot more organizational like detail. But I think what I love about that example is like that guy by the end of, let's say, the weekend showcase or whatever tournament, he probably has a pretty good idea of who the, 1 or 2 guys that he's most interested in, excuse me, based on what he's seen live firsthand and not what he's been told about that person's communication style or about that person's ability. He's been able to witness it firsthand. And it's almost like, when you think about like recruiting or drafting, whether it's college or pro, like you probably would never draft the NHL would probably never draft a player based on just the way they were described to them. They'd be like, we got to see this kid live. And I certainly wouldn't really want to recruit a player that I hadn't been able to see in person. I mean, I think most college coaches are even weary of recruiting players that they've solely seen over video. Like you really want to see them live in person. So the same thing goes here. Like, you know, how often are you ever going to really actually have a person um, run a team for you or coach a team for you over the course of a weekend like this guy that you mentioned before does. This guy's had a ton of success at the level he's been at, and he's in a different level now, and he'll probably have a bunch of success there too. So like maybe that's part of the reason why. Because he's thorough and he's making sure that like, yeah, I'm gonna spend on the front end a lot of time with this thing. But I know that once I find that person, there's zero time spent after that. I'm never gonna have like a 1 year turnover or a mid-season turnover. I'm probably not even gonna have much difficulty throughout the years with this person, even if they don't move on, because I know like I spent the time up front to figure out who's a good fit. And I think like, that's not realistic at every level. Like the level that I coach at or the level that um you're talking about coaching at with your personal example, like it's not necessarily feasible to go through that same sort of process. And I understand and respect that. But again, like for you being asked like what is your communication style? I mean, you could say anything under the sun in theory. and there's no way to really verify unless we were to call your former players and be like, is Drew telling the truth with this or not? So I think that's where like facilitating situations that are going to be more game-like. I mean, I hate to keep harping on this, but again, like when you are watching a player in the recruiting process, like you want to see what they do in, call it, high pressure moments. So ends of games, power play, PK, playoffs. Like you're trying to get a feel for like, all right, in game like 42, when there's no pressure, they're awesome. But what are they like in game 60 when if they lose tonight, they don't make the playoffs or they're in the semifinals and if they lose, they're done. Like you really want to figure that out. So in the same way, like with coaches, it's one thing to be kicked back, feet up on the desk, talk about, this is how I do things. This is what I'm good at. This is where I can improve. It's another thing to actually be like, all right, let's put you in the situation here. We talked about this already on a previous episode, but like purposely messing up an order on an interview for dinner so that you have to see how they handle like a little bit of quote adversity. Like there's ways to do it like that maybe it's super nerdy shit that doesn't apply in the real world, but I think it does. I think it matters, and I think it helps you find people that are gonna be good fits for you or your organization over just finding somebody that could fit, but you don't really know.
Yeah, it makes me jump to, not surprising, Sam Hinkie, but he talks about in his like friendship recruiting process, not even for like the 76ers or where he is now. But like in his friendship recruiting process, he's big on just finding, he calls it find your people. And he will like make it painstakingly long on the front end just to make sure people are in on him and like want to actually be friends with him for the right reasons instead of maybe he was the GM at the 76ers at that time. Maybe he's now a venture capitalist and can like literally change people's lives with money. But um like his first like step in his friend recruiting process is I'll share a book recommendation with you, you share a book recommendation with me. We'll both read it and we'll talk about our thoughts and our contrasting opinions if we have some or our similarities or whatever. But it's like, how long it takes. I mean, some people can read 4 books in a day and post it on Twitter, but like it takes a while to read a book and to read it thoroughly enough to have a conversation with another human that likes the book and can talk about it in depth. So like right off the hop, step one isn't fill out an application. Step one's you share a book with me, I'll share a book with you, and we're going to talk about it. And then like he has a process from there. But it's the same thing as I don't like to roll people when they're doing bad stuff, but when people are doing good stuff, I'll call it out. So it's Anthony Nareen who we're talking about. But like when Anthony brings out people when he was at Tri City to help run his camps in Las Vegas with the team and like run a practice, be on the bench. Um, let's see what you do live. Let's see if you can coach. Let's see how you coach. Yeah, front end, maybe it's expensive. Maybe they're coming out on their own dime. It's expensive time wise. You have to have conversations with, I think at the time one of my buddies went out, there was like 3 or 4 in the mix with him. So like you have to have conversations after each one of them runs a practice. You have to have conversations throughout the weekend with 4 or 5 people that are new to your process, answering questions, asking questions, like time expensive, but you, your margin of error or like if you ask Anthony Noreen if he's ever missed on a coach on an assistant, he'll probably tell you no because like Sam Hinkie's process, it's front end time consuming, so it's back end I never miss. Like I don't miss. So that's what that makes me think of.
Yeah, and like this the Hanky example with reading a book is it certainly drives the point home of like how long that would take. Like you're talking about potentially months depending on how fast someone reads and what else you got going on in your life, to then meet up or talk again about the book. But I think it's the same, like, I think most people preach that that's what you try to do in a recruiting process. Like you do a lot of work on the front end to make sure in the drafting process, like GMs and scouts, like at the pro level and college level coaches, like you call former players of yours, former coaches of theirs. You try to find out as much as you can about this person as a person so that you don't spend a lot up front, call it a first round draft pick, a scholarship at the Division 3, just a roster spot, and then find out in year 2 or maybe month 2, this is not what we thought we were getting into. And so we are keenly aware of it in certain areas like that. But then I think there's room for growth or development or just change in terms of like those other areas. In terms of like the hiring process maybe. And I'll also say like to my for sure me and to my knowledge you like haven't interviewed with an NHL team before or anything
Right.
like that. So there could be organizations with the resources to do all of that stuff that actually go through and spend that kind of time up front and make sure like if we're doing it this way, or sorry, if we are going to do this and meaning hire someone, like we're going to do it this way, where we make sure we don't miss or we remove as many variables as we possibly can. Um, one of a friend of mine in the coaching world he always says this, which I think is spot on to what we're talking about right now. Like with his team, if they do it doesn't even matter what it is, but say it's making sure their video schedule is well thought out. Their lift schedule is organized in advance. Their road trips are detailed, like in terms of itinerary, all that. He'll always say, like, doesn't mean we're gonna win. It does not mean that we're gonna go out and win 2 games this weekend. But at least I know if things don't go well, it wasn't because we were late. It wasn't because we didn't have a meal on the road. It wasn't because our lift was Thursday instead of Wednesday. Like, I'm gonna remove a bunch of variables that could lead to losing. And then if or when we ultimately lose a game here or whenever it happens, I know it's not because of these other things. I can focus on um, maybe the things I wasn't controlling for or the things that happened on the ice versus like, did we show up just exhausted because of X, Y, and Z reason beforehand? So same kind of thing here. Like you could theoretically miss, you could theoretically go through this whole process and still not find someone that you think is a great fit, but you probably reduce the odds of that happening, and then you reduce the potential for it to happen every year or very often.
Yeah, you're just trying to, I mean, almost with everything, whether you're hiring someone, whether you're trying to organize all that stuff off the ice, what you're doing is just trying to improve the confidence interval. And if you just hire based on recommendation from a friend of a friend, like your confidence interval might be 20% or in the 20th percentile. And if you do what Anthony Noreen does, his confidence interval, bringing people out, having them be a part of it, see it, experience it, and then coach in it, like his confidence interval might be 95, 96, 97. So, um, yeah, just speaks to kind of if you don't know, just being intentional, having a process. Um, so yeah. Do you want to wrap on that? Do you have thoughts?
No, honestly, I think we kind of stated there at the end just sort of everything that maybe getting back to our boy Gary Marcus would say as far as things being built in versus having the ability to grow and being malleable and learning. So I don't
Yeah.
have anything there.
You want to give that quote again and then we'll just
Yeah. So it's nature provides a first draft, which experience then revises. Built in does not mean unmalleable. It means organized in advance of experience.
Tell us in the comments how close we stayed to that for the last hour, and we'll see you on the next one.